introduce themselves. So without further ado.
Okay, I'm first. My name is Nick Mahurin. I'm a 1989 Rose-Hulman graduate, and I guess fit the definition of a serial entrepreneur. I started a couple of small businesses while I was at Rose, and took a job with a Fortune 500 company upon graduation, but really couldn't stand it. I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and started my first technology business in less than a year after graduation. Today I run my third. It's called InfraWare. It is located here in Terre Haute, but our customers are nationwide, and it's a hosted software application for healthcare documentation. So I think I'll leave it brief like that and let my other panelists introduce themselves before getting into like barriers to entry and stuff.
Before, let me just wrap this so that we don't get any feedback.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
John Speer, 1998 graduate, chemical engineer from Rose, and I guess I fit in the category of accidental entrepreneur. Out of school, I joined a large corporate company, Cook Medical, as a product development engineer. Worked there for about 7 years. Knew there was something about my makeup, my DNA that didn't really fit the big company model, and I left and went to a small service provider, startup service provider. Worked with medical device inventors and entrepreneurs, and was there for about a year and a half. That's where I learned to be an extrovert instead of the introvert engineer. The cold calling thing, picking up the phone and having to talk to real people on the other end, that was an important experience. And then I got laid off, and that was sort of the changing experience for me. And that's when I started to think about having my own company. Today, I run Creo Quality. We've been in business for about 6 years, and we work with medical device inventors and entrepreneurs and help them bring their products to market. So we help them navigate the FDA process.
I'm Jeremy Clarke, a little more recent graduate, '09, software engineer, computer science. I got my start much like Matt very early. I started my first web development company when I was in high school and kind of built that doing the cold calling, looking in the phone book, literally going through the phone book and just calling people. That's kind of how I built that business, and then I kept doing that through Rose. Still do it today, actually. So it's about 10 years old now. And started my second company while I was at Rose. It's an online educational software business. It's kind of based on the ISTEP, which is the local test, for Indiana. And, since then I've started a few other web-based businesses, a lot of software as a service. And I work for a startup in town, or in Indianapolis, called FormStack, another software as a service. So I just have a lot of experience with, building that product from the idea stage to actually taking it to market. And so that's kind of a lot of what I do.
Well, with that, we're going to start fielding questions. So if anybody's got a question, just raise their hand and we'll come on over.
So I guess my question is, how a lot of entrepreneurs start when you hear their names and they're former Google employees, former Microsoft employees, and what's your perspective on whether you should be working for one of the big companies and for 5 to 10 years and get some network, get some experience going, and then start your own company versus get started early in college, high school, and then just doing your own thing from the beginning?
I can take that.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Sure.
Well, that's a great question. In fact, it's interesting because people talk about barriers to entry. I think they normally mean other things, but I've been in a position to consult with young people a lot over the years about this very thing. And here's my take on that. We all get experience throughout our lifetimes and in our careers and in other aspects of our lives. And so no one should ever discount the value of that experience, because if you get a chance to work for Google, you've got to be asleep to not learn a ton, right? On the other hand, I would say this. If we don't talk about the barriers to entry to any specific business, but if you talk about the barriers to entry to starting a business itself, one of the things that I found is I did it as a very young man. I walked away from a good salary from a Fortune 500 company, benefits and things like that, but I did it at a time when I wasn't addicted to that. So one of the things I tell young people from time to time is I'll query them about, well, how many of you want to start a business? And might have been Jeff that threw out the 50% of adults. Well, I find that with youngsters. I went into junior achievement classes through the years and stuff. And a lot, maybe even more than 50% will declare that, someday they'd like to start a business. And I'll ask them, well, when do you think would be the right time? And the most common answer is something along the way this question was posed. Well, I'm going to go out, work for somebody for 5 or so years. Well, what happens? You graduate from college. As a college graduate, you're used to living on almost nothing, right? But you graduate from college and you reward yourself with a new car. So you've got a $500 a month car payment. Then maybe you meet the love of your life and you buy a house. Now you've got a $1,500 mortgage. Then you've got a child to take care of, right? And so if you think of starting a business at the age of, 25 to 30, after you've already become accustomed to those lifestyle choices and when you're responsible for others, it actually begins to seem quite expensive. You're risking your family's livelihood, that of, the health care for your children or something like that. So I, for one, am an advocate. If it's in your DNA, if owning or running a business is something that you need to do, I think there's no safer time to do it than very young.
Yeah, and I'll just add a small twist to that. I mean, I don't disagree with what was just said, but again, having been that accidental entrepreneur, I mean, I knew who Dr. Mason was when I went to school here, but I didn't have any idea what the term entrepreneur even meant when I was a Rose student. I knew, had friends that had taken his class, but it was not, and I was a chemical engineer, so I wasn't going to have Dr. Mason in my time here at Rose just because of the courses that he taught. It wasn't until many years later that I actually met Dr. Mason, which was sort of a weird twist, to become connected with somebody that you were exposed to almost every day, pass them in the hallway often. But I think, I was one of those people that when I started when I became an entrepreneur, I guess, I had a mortgage, I had 2 car payments, I had 2 kids, and my wife thought I was crazy, to do something like this. But I think there's a misnomer. I think a lot of people hear the word entrepreneur and they think risk taker. But I think engineer who's an entrepreneur is not a risk taker, generally speaking. I think engineers are very, we're looking for, we want everything to be black and white. We don't like living in a world that's gray. And I think that was what I tried to do as that entrepreneur was remove as much risk from that as possible. So when I started my business, I did it nights and weekends as a second job. I had the income coming in, the 40-hour week job that had the benefits. So I moonlighted, and all the income that I generated from the night and weekend venture, I put it away. It became my cushion for that day that I decided to make that leap. And the day I made the leap, I mean, I guess had I known how it was going to all play out, I might not have taken that leap. So I guess there was a point where I took a risk, but I believe that the risk was worth taking because the cushion was there. So I guess if you're later in your career and you're thinking about venture into entrepreneurship, remove as much risk as you can from your equation.
And I was kind of just to agree with what Nick said. I was like Jeff. I knew, even probably my freshman year, not trying to get a job after I graduate, going to start my own company. And I had that mindset all the way through Rose. And so graduation came. It's exactly what I did. Continued to build my business, ran that. And I feel, obviously there's the chance to work for a bigger company like Google, Facebook. That type of opportunity could have presented itself, would have given me a lot of experience. But I feel like that was the time to continue building my business. I gained a lot of experience just by doing that. So I would think if you have the opportunity right away to do it, I'd say go for it.
Hi. I don't know if this is. I can't hear. Oh, there I go. Do you think that going straight into entrepreneurship right after you graduate would get in the way of some of those life goals, like getting together with someone, having the house, or does it just allow you to plan better, in your opinion?
You only have one life. Have fun. You know, the things that I mean, I think I heard it a couple times today. Money doesn't really matter, and that may sound like a cliche BS answer, but it doesn't really matter. It's more important to enjoy what you do and to have fun. And when you're having fun, loving life, you know, whether that's working for a large company or whether that's starting your own business and, you know, just seeing what can happen with that, you'll meet the people that you're supposed to meet. It's just the way life works.
This thing working? Okay. I graduated Rose in 91, so I'm in the middle of some of you guys there. When I graduated, I remember running into somebody who'd started a business. And I remember thinking how that's just amazing to me that this 20-year-old person with no experience out in the workplace has started a business. And to me, that was a huge barrier, just that mindset. How do you guys overcome that mindset that I don't have any experience in the business world and yet I'm starting a business?
Okay, I'll start. I've got a couple answers to that. I think I just heard John say, I'll paraphrase him, he seems to be very pleased that he started his business, but I think I heard him say something to the extent of, if I knew then what I know now, I may not have done it.
Yeah,
did you say something like that?
I did.
And there's a dichotomy or a paradox there, right? And I've said that very thing to myself. So there's something kind of special about being in your 20s. You still have some of that invincibility. You don't have, you know, normally like when children come along and you think, oh, I'm so vulnerable, I've got to protect these children. You haven't built some, you know, little empire or something that you're going to protect or something. So to be perfectly candid about it, I think something that is pretty special about that mid-20s time frame is the combination of the confidence, invincibility, and perhaps even a little bit of ignorance. Because if you did know everything that you'll know someday, you might do exactly what Jeff described half an hour ago and begin to fill the other side of the balance sheet with all the things that could go wrong and why maybe I shouldn't do this. So that's one answer for me. The other is I was pretty fortunate, even though I only made about $3 an hour. When I was a young Rose student, I worked for an entrepreneur. Mowed grass around apartments he owned and different things. He ended up starting a trucking company. I worked on those trucks on Saturdays and stuff. And I just had that exposure to an entrepreneur, to a guy who, he hadn't gone to college or anything, but he was just the kind of guy that got up every day and just believed that he was equal to any challenge that arose. And I saw him not worry about the lack of structure, the lack of the road being laid in front of him. He just plowed through it, and I deeply admired him, and I guess he became a little bit of a role model for me.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is you have to pivot. You constantly have to evolve. When I first started my business, I believed that medical device companies needed help writing quality system procedures that would comply with FDA and ISO. And you may not know what I just said, and that's okay. Because some of my customers, I learned, didn't know what I just said either. And I learned that there was some market for what I wanted to do, what I thought Creo quality was going to be from the beginning. But once I had a client or two, I learned that there were other needs that really aligned really well. I mean, what I found is project management was a big need for medical device companies. Somebody that knew how to navigate FDA process and product development. So my business evolved probably 4 or 5 times in the 6 years that we've been in business. But it's all about kind of listening to what the customer needs are, and making slight changes in direction to get you towards your destination. So I think you have to be agile enough to pivot when you need to.
And with, I had started my business early, so I was very young, and so I ran into that issue a lot of where, you kind of go in front of people and they see this young kid trying to present them to build this website or do whatever for them, and you almost have to, I tried to do a lot and show them what I could do. You build trust in them, and I think now it's changing a lot. Like as the years went by, people got more used to like, okay, people that are going to do this for me are younger, like it's just their generation. So it got a lot easier as time went on to get those customers that are going to hire a kid that's in high school to build, do something for their company. So, I guess work very hard and show them exactly what you can do, and that shows them that you are actually just as good as someone who's in their 20s, late 20s. I guess just prove what you can do.
Anybody, go ahead.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead.
Question mostly for John, I guess, but similar situation, what you described. I've got 2 kids, job and benefits, been working for 8 years in industry, but have an entrepreneurial spirit and want to break away. You started getting a supplementary income before you jumped off the cliff. Do you have a recommended percentage of your annual salary before you do that? And also, what happened that first year with your family? Were you able to, was it ramen noodles or,
Yeah,
how scary was it?
That's a good question. Recommended dollar amount. That's how do you like to live? That's really whatever the answer to that question is. I mean, do you like to eat filet? Do you like to, or do you like ramen noodles? And what are you willing to do? And what is your wife and kids? What are they willing to do? I mean, like my kids, a few months ago, challenged me. They said something about they didn't like what I was fixing for dinner, and I said something about, well, we'll have ramen noodles, and they said, okay. I said, well, guess what we're going to have for the next 5 nights? We ate ramen noodles for 5 nights. But it's all about what your lifestyle is, but you got to, you'll be wrong. Whatever you think that number is, there's got to be a point where you just got to be comfortable enough. You got to overcome that barrier, and that barrier in that case is you. I mean, and if you have the drive and determination to succeed, you'll do what you have to do to make it happen, and I was able to, I think, having that primary income was important because it was able to insulate my family from this risk or this journey that I was about to drag them along. And for the most part, during the past 6 years, I've been able to insulate my family so they don't know anything different. Our lifestyle didn't change, which was a fortunate thing. But, it depends on what you're passionate about. I mean, I would say make sure there's a market for your opportunity. Find somebody that's going to pay you to do what it is that you want to do, and see if you can find, multiple people to do that before you make that leap. So, it's a tough thing to calculate, and none of us have a crystal ball to be able to say, yeah, this is the way it's going to go, and this is how it's going to be, and these are the number of customers I'm going to get, and so on and so forth. Like, I talked to a lady that started a business sometime last year, and she was fretting because she only had her revenue projected through 2014. I'm like, are you kidding? That would be fantastic. I mean, so other thoughts?
Well, I think it's interesting. You directed the question to John, and based on our backgrounds, he's exactly the right guy to direct it to. Just a couple of comments to add. I think everybody in the room is smart enough to realize this, but occasionally I talk to people who mistake revenue for income, right? So if you're doing something on the evenings, on the weekends, things like that, and you're thinking of it as extra money, don't ever get caught up in thinking, well, I've got a way to bill $100,000 in my first year. Don't get caught up in the trap of thinking that's spendable money, because you'll reinvest that, into the business and stuff. The other thing is, keep in mind, it's interesting, John said his standard of living didn't change. And I think I may have inferred a little bit there, but I think he meant when he started his business and perhaps also after it got successful. Mm-hmm. Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs who have naturally been successful, a few years in, begun making great money. But then you also want to be cautious in the great years about how you let your standard of living increase, because the tough years are coming. They will. And almost anybody who's been doing it for 20 years will tell you they cannot believe how much money they've made in the good years. It almost feels wrong. And they can't believe how much money they've lost in a bad year when they worked really hard. So you do need to temper. Would you agree with that, John?
Absolutely.
If
you're driving a Pontiac, don't go buy a Mercedes. Drive a Pontiac.
Not just because you had one good year. Let it lag a little bit. Build a buffer. Be good advice, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I've got a question. So in terms of barriers further down the road, so let's suppose you've got your product in market, you're chugging along, you're the first to market, but all of a sudden a competitor enters the space. I don't know if any of you guys have been in that situation, but how would you tackle that problem?
Me personally, it would give me the drive just to make my product better, and so I would go back to market, talk to customers, really put that in overdrive to figure out, okay, if I haven't found that niche yet, let's try and find a niche, really make that market, really to kind of put that barrier around me. If I build a niche, it's a lot easier to protect. From a software standpoint, as Jeff said, I mean, there's patents for software, but they're really a lot different than for pharmaceutical stuff. So building that niche and finding that niche where you can really protect yourself is what I'd really try to do, especially if I'm first to market and I see other people entering in.
Yeah, I think that the niche is important, but at the same time, I'm going to caution you not to be so specialized that you have you've limited yourself to just a handful of potential customers. But don't overpromise. Don't say that you can do something and then struggle to do it. Always underpromise and overdeliver. I'm in the consulting space, and so there are tons of competitors in medical device consulting, but I believe I have a not unique, but a good set of experiences that have been in engineering. I've been on the business side. I've been in quality. I've been in regulatory. I've been in manufacturing. So I think that from a consulting standpoint, I have to figure out how to pitch what I know and my set of experiences to be more holistic and helping my clients get their products to market.
Yeah, don't worry too much about competitors, because if you've been fortunate enough to create a market, then others will follow you. How many times did Jeffrey use the term steal in his remarks, right? They'll be on your website, they'll steal your ideas, hell, they'll steal your marketing materials. I mean, it's an ecosystem, so that will happen. So don't worry too much about that. Worry about the 22-year-old who's looking for a way to totally make you irrelevant. Somebody who just wants to compete with you and drive your pricing down a little bit or keep you honest, that's no big deal. Somebody who makes mousetraps no longer needed, that's what you got to look out for. And what you have to do is make sure you don't become complacent, become the establishment, and have the need for your product wiped out. Keep innovating.
We have time for 2 more questions, so go ahead.
All right. Whenever you take a job, whenever you get a long-term career, you can build up a little bit of a buffer between what you call your personal life and your work life. As an entrepreneur, I would figure the case would be that your business becomes your life. Do you guys do anything specific to separate personal friends and business contacts, personal friends and business contacts, or do those lines just become completely fluid?
I think the lines become a little bit fluid, but I remember a story when I was working at Cook, the corporate job right out of school, and this may sound sick and twisted to some of you, but it's reality and it happens. I thought that I was climbing this corporate ladder because I thought that it meant something, and I remember that a colleague and I, it's like we used to race each other to see who could be there first. in the day. Like we would arrive at like 6:30 in the morning, right? And we'd be there till like 5 o'clock at night. And a good friend of mine that I actually went to school with, that I had the opportunity to work with at this job, one night I came out of to my car and I found he stuck a Post-it note on my car and says, the longer you work, the less per hour you make, because I was salarying. And that message stuck with me because that's when I just got stuck, and I couldn't separate work and business. I was so driven to climb this fictitious ladder that meant nothing whatsoever. And when I escaped that, sometimes it is blurry between the work stuff and the personal stuff. But I'm having a good time, so the work stuff's fun and the personal stuff's fun. So who cares if it's blurry, I don't lose that much any sleep over that.
Let's go back to the notion of passion. If you really have a passion for it, you're not going to be able to resist telling your friends about it, right? And if you're good at what you do, you're honorable at what you do, you're probably going to have a hard time not making friends with the people you're doing business with. So many of my closest friends are people I do business with, or even employees of mine. You asked about contacts, so I think that's very important. I would pivot your question just a little bit and make sure that as you develop a family, you let your contacts be fluid and friendships and everything, but make sure that you do maintain some ability to compartmentalize, so your spouse and your children don't have a bad day at home just because you had a bad day at work, or vice versa. You don't want to underperform at work or take it out on people you work with just because, and that's probably true whether you're self-employed or not. That'd be my thinking.
Yeah, and I have friends who are just business contacts. I just deal with them during a business day. I have friends that I just, go out to dinner with, go get drinks, whatever, and so those are just the social side. And then, I have friends I do both with. So those lines are very blurry, but kind of going back to compartmentalizing that, like you want to make sure that, just because you have a bad business relationship, like that doesn't bleed over into the social aspect. Like you might disagree on something from a business standpoint, but that doesn't necessarily mean you guys can't be friends and can't develop that relationship. Obviously, there's stuff that can go wrong there, but so trying to compartmentalize all that stuff, I think, is a very good idea.
All right, this is our last question.
This is Mike. There we go. Patents. They're a great way to get ideas for what you want to do with your business, but clearly when you do that, you're opening yourself up to possibly get sued later if people who make the original patent think you're infringing. Now, clearly, there's not going to be any absolute legal advice from this question, but is there any sort of general strategy to kind of minimize the risk there?
There's a guy right behind you.
Talk to him.
Dustin, ask him. Patents. Patents, depends on your particular industry. I'm in the med device industry, so IP patents are fairly important to that industry. I'm sorry, I just don't feel like I could really add. I'm really qualified. I would have to defer to somebody like Dustin.
John gave the right answer. Talk to Dustin after, and he can help you. I have a patent pending with him right now, but and Dustin can speak out if he does disagree with this, and he probably will. But I would disagree with the premise of the question. I think you began by saying patents are a great way to develop business ideas. I barely understand the patent that I have pending right now that Dustin's people wrote. I can tell you, my degree from Rose-Hulman absolutely has not qualified me to surf patent applications and learn anything. So that's like, I could find 1,000 better places to go to develop business ideas, including Jeff's idea of Walmart. I was borrowing that statement from an earlier presentation. Okay, sorry to the earlier presenter. You got a comment?
Talk to Dustin.
All right.
There you go. Dustin's getting a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Referral fees.
All right. Well, let's give our panel a hand.